On the Jingle Time today, we don't have too many history lessons, but we do want to start off with one, which is torn from the headlines.
Have you heard the news today? Oh boy.
Now, this is not really a story of national significance. It's more interesting locally, but it is interesting in a radio sense, and we will, of course, tie this into jingles because that is what we do. Well, as you may know, there is an entity in the world called the Educational Media Foundation, EMF. And what they do is they have a national radio network, which they call the Kluv Radio Network. It's a contemporary Christian thing, and they play that kind of music, and they give inspiring messages and stuff like that. Now, this is the same group that took over and bought stations such as WPLJ in New York. We talked about that when it happened. PLJ, of course, being a legendary New York music station, used to be WABC-FM at one time, but eventually it was purchased by EMF, so now it is Kluv. Same thing with WRQX in Washington, which was the FM side of WMAL at one time. And they have lots of stations everywhere, but they never had one here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And the reason for that is there is a station here with the call letters KLUV. And they call themselves Kluv. At least they did until this week. So obviously the Kluv national format could not be heard here, at least not branded with the name Kluv, because there was a Kluv here, and Kluv was an oldie station and kind of morphed into a, classic hits station, whatever. So that all changed this week, because on June 14th, a mere 4 days ago, the 98.7 spot on the Dallas radio dial became 98.7 The Spot. The Spot. Okay, we'll get back to that. But why did that happen? Well, it happened because the EMF, the Educational Media Foundation, bought a couple of stations from Odyssey, and Odyssey sold them WTSS in Buffalo and WLFP in Memphis for $15.5 million. And part of the deal was that on the Dallas station, which they were retaining, they would change the name. They would at least maybe not change the call letters, but they'd stop saying Kluv on the air so that it could be used with the Kluv national format now. So what used to be 98.7 Kluv is now 98.7 The Spot, running with no DJs at the moment. And, I just laugh when I see that name because I'm thinking, really, The Spot? Now, of course, what they had in mind was, well, this is the spot for music. This is the spot for your favorite stuff. And all I can think of is, yeah, the spot. It's that thing I'm trying to get out of my shirt where I spilled the mustard, So, I don't know. They must have focus grouped it. I don't know. But anyway, I thought it would be an excuse to talk a little bit about the 98.7 spot, the Kluv spot here on the Dallas radio dial, because it is kind of an interesting story. And yes, it does eventually lead us to some jingles and things. It always does. But here's the interesting thing about that particular station. In 1959, when the station wasn't even on the air yet, it was given the call sign KOST. Coast. But that was never used. So when the station actually did go on the air, it signed on in 1961 as KROW, and it was owned by Gordon McClendon. Now, we talked about Gordon McClendon a little while back. We talked about how he kind of helped perfect the top 40 format during the early 60s and so forth. Well, his big station in town, of course, was the AM station, 1190 KLIF. But they had this FM as well, and eventually they did change the call letters to KLIF FM, and basically they just simulcast the AM all day. Okay, well, in July of 66, now this is a good lesson in business for you, at least the broadcasting business. In July 1966, the station changed its call letters to KNUS, which they, of course, called K-News. Now, the reason for those letters was that McClendon had planned to provide an all-news format on the station, but that never happened, so they just kind of kept with the call letters, KNUS. And at first, it was an automated progressive rock, underground kind of thing, and then they added live DJs in about 1967. Well, here's the thing. In 1972, McClendon sold the AM KLIF to Fairchild for a ton of money, and he offered to sell them the FM K-News as well, but Fairchild declined because, what good is an FM station, right?